Hello, welcome to Friday I'm in Bed.
Podcast for midlife women living their best life, but in bed by 10.
Okay, we're going to start today with the moaning, where we can get the random things that have annoyed us this week off of our chest. We just got one each this week. I think it must have been a lesser annoying week. What's been annoying you, Kate?
Really random. Fingers. I know, weird one. Fingers and rings. When I buy a ring and it fits my finger, and then my fingers swell and it doesn't fit, or they shrink and it doesn't fit. And it keeps doing that throughout the day. Now, the reason this is on the list is last night, I was applying my HRT, so my hands were gelled, jellified, let's just say. And I lifted my hand up. I am doing actions now for anybody that is just listening. And my entire ring stack flew off my finger. I do wear a lot of rings, across the room, hit a vase, bounced back off it, and have disappeared. And the one that's disappeared is a solid gold and diamond ring. Now, of course, it's in my house, but it's like, what is wrong with my fingers? Like, they fitted earlier, and then they didn't fit. And I'm getting, so as I say, it's very random, but this whole, like, how do you find a ring that fits when you have fingers that swell and fingers that, what's the word? Shrink?
Yes.
Retract.
Okay,
Shrivel.
I'm gonna have to cancel you for fingers, because I'm quite attached to my fingers. I do feel they serve an important function, and then we should probably hang on to fingers.
So yours
But the swelling
swallow.
bit, the swelling bit I am with you with. So I can allow half of it, but the other half, we have to keep fingers, but it would be good if they didn't swell. So I had to keep, when I gained weight, I couldn't wear my wedding ring, right? So then we went and got new ones made together so that I could wear a wedding ring again. And we got them made in a place around the corner. And then I walked the dogs in the winter. So I got the ring in the summer, walked the dogs in the winter, and my finger shrunk and it somehow fell off on the way round. So it was lost. I can now wear my wedding ring again. However, when I went for a run on Saturday, my fingers swelled up and I ended up having to take it off. And I put it in the back pocket of my running shorts and then put my shorts through the washing machine with the pocket open. Fortunately, I found the ring in the little rubber seal around the edge of the washing machine, but that was a close call on wedding rings. So I do like having fingers. They are incredibly useful.
They are useful, but and of course you can just not wear rings, but like, for goodness sake, fingers. But mine are throughout the day as well, and retracting a lot.
Your arms in the air so that they.
It's just, and I've lost my ring, and I'm not worrying about it too much because it must be somewhere. But I think I've got one of those beds that lifts up, and I think it's gone into the mechanism of the bed, and I'm just like, it's an expensive rig. So swelling fingers cancelled. What about you?
Okay, mine is also very random. And actually, I was talking about washing machines with my ring. So smooth segue, Jem, smooth segue. Mine is, and I don't know if anyone else is going to identify with this, because mine is specifically the timer on my washing machine. Okay.
Oh, you told me about this.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, and it's still annoying me now. So it tells me that it's going to take like 59 minutes to finish the wash. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it tells me there's a minute left, and I think, brilliant. I'll hang around, and I won't go out. I'll hang around and I'll hang the washing up before I go. And then I sit there. And 5 minutes later, it still says there's a minute left. Why lie? If you don't know, just don't have a timer at all. But don't just go, I'm nearly there. And then suddenly
I feel like I'm going to have to cancel you for this one, because I think it's your washing machine. Are you sure you haven't just got a faulty washing machine? Because my washing machine says 1 minute. And I don't mean to gloat, but my washing machine then in 59 seconds goes, and then I have to wait another minute to open it up because it likes to reset or whatever it does. But mine works. I feel like you've just got a washing machine that's got a problem.
Okay, fair enough.
So there you go. None of us are passing, or whatever we call it, this week.
This week on Friday I'm in Bed, we're starting with Green Party MP Hannah Spencer and the shirt that launched 1,000 tweets. She's been criticised for what she wears before, but this time things took a stranger turn when social media became convinced she was wearing a £2,000 Gucci shirt in Parliament. But the problem is, it wasn't Gucci at all, it was a charity shop find. We're talking about why women's clothes still attract more scrutiny than men's, why nobody seems interested in the price of a politician's suit, and how quickly misinformation can become accepted as fact when enough people repeat it online.
Then we're talking about China's so-called leftover women, educated, successful women choosing careers, independence, and single life over marriage. With falling birth rates causing concern, the label was intended as an insult, but it hasn't worked. We're asking why women who opt out of the traditional script still make people so uncomfortable, and whether being left over might actually sound quite appealing. Grab a cuppa and let's get into it. Hi, Gemma. How are you?
That's a fun question. Life is chaos. My mum and dad came to visit at the end of last week, which it started off chaotically because I thought they were coming on Thursday and then all of a sudden they were here on Wednesday afternoons. But then on Friday, my dad started having stomach pains and he called 111 and they told him to call 999, which he refused to do. So we took him up to A&E and it turns out he had an inflamed gallbladder and nearly sepsis and ended up being admitted to the hospital on IV antibiotics and Oromorph for the pain. And he's been in there now since Friday. They were supposed to go home on Saturday. So we then had to my mum had to sleep on our sofa for a couple of nights before we managed to rebook the Airbnb. And they've also got 2 Pomeranians with them. So it's basically been fantastic fun. I've been up and down to the hospital. So it's been a distracting week. He seems okay now and he might get out today. So
Fingers
crossed. And that's my week in a nutshell. How was yours? Better or worse?
Well, obviously better than that because I didn't have a sick parent. But I'm feeling, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, particularly if they're parents as well, like it's all a lot at the moment. GCSEs are finished, which is great. My son finishes all his stuff work today, in fact, tonight. But it's just like there's so much on. And I knew there would be so much on in May and June. And I decided I'd take less work on and I'd lean into the fact that like parenting and doing all this stuff was going to have to happen like more so and accept that and be fine. But I just can't, that feeling where you just don't have enough hours in the day to do anything. And I don't know what the answer is. I was thinking about it this morning. I was having a shower and I was like, what is the answer? And I was like, well, if I ask people what is the answer, it'll be like, get up earlier, which is because I don't get up very early.
Not from me.
But yeah, I wake up about 8:30, 9. I get up late, but then I need a lot of sleep. And if I got up earlier, I would just go to bed earlier, and I already go to bed at 10. So I'd just go to bed at 9 or I'd go to bed at 8 and then I wouldn't see my husband. So that doesn't really work either. And it's just that feeling of like, how is it just me? It's not just me. I know it's not. Like how the hell do you juggle all this stuff and work and have time for yourself? Like, now it sounds like the moaning, but and so I'm feeling that kind of overwhelm, I think, and trying not to beat myself up. But how the bloody hell does one? It's back to that whole adage of you can have it all that we were all fed. You can have the career and you can have the family.
I think my first thing whenever I feel like that is to just decide what I can say no to. Like how many of these things, if there's anything that you can say no to, it's got to go, even if you don't really want to say no to it. Like it's got to go if there's too much stuff that you can't say no to.
I know. The good news is in 2 weeks, I'm going on less than 2 weeks now. I'm going on holiday. So that's great. A reset. But, like saying no to picking my daughter up at 11 o'clock at night from some party, I can't say no. They're the ones.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the ones you can't say no to. You can't
but you want to. They're the ones that like, this is impacting me.
Yeah. I want to keep the fun stuff, but unfortunately, sometimes the fun stuff is the stuff, or the stuff you like is the stuff that has to go so that you can manage.
I know. So I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed, but lots going on. We went to Leeds to look at my son's new accommodation. I went to London. I've been to 2 art exhibitions this week. So it's lots. So I could have said no to all that, but then it's a bit like I don't want to say no to going to London with my mum and looking at art. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to. That's the stuff I want to do.
I want all the picking people up to disappear. Yeah, no, I get it.
So yeah, that was a bit of a moan, wasn't it?
Yes. Okay. This episode, what should we call it? It's Friday I'm moaning.
Yeah.
Though again, that could be interpreted other ways.
Yeah, and you've got to fit that in too. Anyway, we've got lots to talk about, so maybe we should get into it. I'm going to start with today's topic, which is it a Gucci shirt or is it by a brand called Costa Brava? So this happened, actually, I don't know when it happened, 2 weeks ago maybe. Hannah Spencer, the Green MP, was talking in Parliament and she was wearing a patterned shirt and she was getting lots of funny looks from behind her, which, to be fair, is nothing new because she
Isn't that because she called them the scum of the earth or something?
Yeah, and she was basically slating reform and then they didn't like it. Anyway, the usual Parliament stuff. And what happened after that was a discourse around the fact that a Green MP, a woman, was wearing a Gucci shirt. How dare she wear a Gucci shirt? And it started off with just sort of a few people mentioning it, but then whether it was bots or not, we've talked about this in the past, all kind of piled on X, formerly Twitter, about this Gucci shirt. I actually screen grabbed 2 of the, the tweets. I don't know what they're called now. Are they called tweets? They're not called tweets anymore.
Don't know.
X's. Anyway, the kind of commentary that was coming out was Hannah Spencer, millionaire plumber of the decade. Millionaire plumber. I don't think she's a millionaire. Plumber of the decade. Darling of the Green Party communism. Wears a £1,500 Gucci silk shirt. Plenty for me, but not for thee. It hasn't taken her long to start shopping in Knightsbridge. And then the next one was, nothing says, fight the wealthy elite, quite like delivering the lecture in a Gucci blouse. Eye roll. We see you. They were just 2, but it kind of carried on and on and on. And eventually led to Hannah herself making quite a funny video about, yeah, here's the shirt. It's not Gucci. It's by a brand called Costa Brava. I bought it from Oxfam when I worked for Oxfam. And she made a joke of, like Jesus performing miracles and, hey, hun, bring your clothes to me because I can change them to Gucci, just by wearing it or something. So this is the story, but actually this isn't about whether Hannah Spencer was wearing Gucci, in my opinion, because I think the first thing is why would it be a problem anyway? She was wearing Gucci. You are allowed to wear whatever you want. And so many people who wear designer brands who aren't millionaires buy them on Vinted anyway. So it could well be a secondhand Gucci shirt, for example, or it could be a Gucci knockoff, or it could be looking just a bit like it. Who knows? Who cares? I think is my first thought. And then there is a lot of discourse around, obviously Hannah herself. She's already received criticism for, daring to wear bright colours in a drab suited workplace. They're my words. That's not a quote I've read. But you know what I mean? She's wearing bright colours. And the whole kind of, well, how much did the man's suit cost? It might have been tailor-made in Savile Row and the shoes might be £300. And, so actually we've got a bit of double standards here. And this is obviously nothing new. I know there was a story years back. Angela Rayner was wearing a wrap dress. And I think when she sat, her leg was out slightly and it was distracting the men opposite. And, and even Theresa May wore leopard heels. And it was on the front page of all the newspapers how the Prime Minister was wearing leopard print heels. So there's that kind of debate going on. And then there's the whole, how when somebody wants to discredit us, women, they always go for what we look like and what we're wearing. They never go for our policies or what we're actually saying. It's about what we look like. So, why is that? And then there's the overwhelming, the bigger issue, which I'm really concerned about, is the fact that one person can say she's wearing Gucci. And then there is this almighty pile on Twitter, X, with so much discourse around it that it becomes fact. And therefore we all believe that she was wearing Gucci. So it's kind of the power of this kind of social media to go from, is that Gucci, to she's definitely wearing Gucci. How dare she? She's a hypocrite. It's yeah. So there's lots to talk about, and it's less so about the shirt. Although I would say, let's start with the shirt. The shirt did look quite Gucci, I have to say.
Yeah, it definitely had Gucci vibes.
It did.
It was all I saw of it, I actually saw her speech in Parliament. So I saw the video of that. And then I saw her reel of her going, this is the shirt. Look, here's the label. It was vintage. It was from a brand called Costa Brava, and she bought it in a charity shop like years and years and years ago for like under 15 quid or something. So yeah, so I saw that, but I didn't see any of the, I've not been on the platform formerly known as Twitter for a very long time because I just couldn't stand the dumpster fire. So I didn't really see any of the other stuff about it. So I don't know. Do you know how they decided it was Gucci? Do they like try and reverse image search it or something? Or did they just make it up?
I think somebody did do something like that. I think there was a reverse image search or so. Now you've said it, I feel like I've read that. It is very Gucci-esque, to be fair. But, was it the woman that was sitting behind her?
But then a lot of Gucci's vibe is like that kind of retro 70s look, and she bought a vintage shirt. So
exactly.
It's not even a Gucci knockoff.
No, I know. And you and I know that.
Gucci are the knockoffs.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I found it very interesting. So we quite often get this with Hannah Spencer because her original speech, I can't remember exactly now, but she said something like she called the people in the house scum or something like that. So she called Reform MPs, I think, scum. And so the people behind her were like, call me names, you pathetic beast. And then, so quite often when she's done stuff like that, there will then be a backlash where people attempt to discredit her. It's happened with like the drinking in Parliament, which we did as a subscriber special a few weeks ago. So yeah, people quite often use that to use things to try and discredit her.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point about when she says something they don't like, which MPs say things each other don't like all the time. But what they seem to do with Hannah, and it'd be interesting to know if they do it with anybody else, but I don't think everybody stands out as much fashion-wise. They come at her, but instead of having a conversation about what she was saying, so for example, the alcohol thing, actually having a debate around it, they turn around and say, well, you're dressed like a clown. So it's like they come for the woman, or particularly her, but I think this is in general to what we look like and how we're dressed rather than actually what we're saying, which is very patronizing when they are all elected MPs and they're all there because they were chosen to be there by constituents.
I think it's quite interesting when women are supposed to care what they look like, but when they then go into an environment and and they're supposed to follow fashion and do these things and but when they go into an environment that's male dominated like Parliament, they then start to get criticism for exactly that same thing. It's like that they're not supposed to. They're supposed to fit in. They're supposed to be more man when they go into those environments and fit in with the black and the greys and the browns that all the men mostly, but also the women wear when they're in Parliament. When what she's wearing is she had a shirt and trousers on, so it wasn't exactly like she'd gone in and something hugely flamboyant. It's just happened to be that the trousers and shirt were green and patterned. So yeah, she gets criticism on that a lot. And obviously she's a woman and she's blonde, which always is a not take people seriously kind of thing, isn't it? And it's all about having that historic thing where for women to get into these spaces, they need to behave more like men rather than being there because of what they can bring to it as themselves, which I always find incredibly frustrating.
You've just reminded me of two stories whilst speaking about my life. So I was in a role at Tesco's and I headed up the department, but I wanted a promotion. And I remember my female boss sitting me down and said one of the best things I could do in order to get promoted was to stop bleaching my hair. And that's when I worked in the fashion department at Tesco's, it's worth saying. So which is actually more female and more fashion-y, but once you get to a certain level, it becomes more men in suits running. But back then it was anyway. So yeah, I was told if I wanted to be taken more seriously, these are the actual words she used. If you want to be taken more seriously, you need to consider not bleaching your hair. And I remember actually getting very angry with I didn't just go, yeah, okay. I think I would have done for quite a lot of stuff. And I remember saying, don't you think I know that? Don't you think I know that, for example, when a builder comes around to my house to give me a quote, he'll see what I look like, my blonde hair, and make assumptions. So I have to be more professional. My handshake has to be firmer because so that I'm taken seriously. Like, I know that, but I can't believe that you're actually saying it. So it's definitely a thing. And I remember, because Tesco's was such a male orientated company in the departments I was working in properties. So I worked in the property function. They buy buildings and build them. You were allowed to wear whatever you want as long as it was smart. But I remember I presented in a meeting. I'd always worn my own kind of clothes. I am very me in how I look. Like, I never wore a black suit. But I remember I was wearing a 50s skirt and a little cropped, not cropped, like a shortish.
Yeah, like waist length.
Like a twin set-y kind of thing, but not. And boots, and I was smart and I was presenting, and I remember one of the senior people wanted to discredit me, and I finished my speech because I was presenting, and I was in quite a senior, not like a middle management to senior role, and at the end of it he turned around and said, "Can we talk about your skirt?" and laugh. And my skirt was below the knee, loose. It's a circle skirt, like a 50s circle skirt. There's nothing like outrageous about it. So suddenly I've had those two flashes of oh my God, this is nothing new. I mean, obviously it's not. It's a surprise, but it's happened to me because it's that male environment, as you just said. Male suited.
I mean, I've been picked up at work for things that I wore before. Not so much. I was trying to think. I can't think particularly in an office environment where anyone, but I never got to kind of a senior position like that. And other places I've worked, there have been uniforms. But I worked in a psychiatric unit for a while, and you had to wear comfy clothes that you could move in, and were relatively smart, but you wore your own clothes. So I used to wear a pair of black trousers, and I had a kind of, not shrunken, but it was a kid's polo shirt that I used to wear. It came to just covered the top of my trousers. Do you know what I mean? So it was it was fitted but not skin tight, it wasn't huge baggy. And I got picked up and told that I had to wear something different because when I reached up, you could see a bit of skin above my trousers. And it was dangerous in a psychiatric ward, apparently.
But this is still I've got a daughter having just, and I use the word survived 12 years of the school system. She's now out of it. But, the amount of times she's been told that forget short skirts, just showing your knee is distracting to boys and you need to cover your knees. And you have to wear tights at all time, even if it's 30 degrees, but we might let you off, maybe, but we'll decide, because it's distracting to see leg and, all this. So I think it starts young. So it's, there is, even when there's a uniform, as you just said, we women are having to adapt, change, or be conscious. I mean, even Theresa May, who, without getting political, that isn't my favourite prime minister of all time, but she was wearing a black suit or something. She didn't wear anything
black
outrageous.
Suit, below the knee skirt, but she had leopard print shoes on.
She always had those chunky necklaces, statement necklaces. But statement necklaces were definitely a thing in the 2010s, weren't they? But she had leopard shoes, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, she's got leopard shoes on it." But it's literally they were court shoes with the heat, they were the style of them, and they were safe and they were respected. But it was I
am curious, have there ever been incidents where an MP has decided to wear a purple suit or a purple shirt or I don't know, tie with Father Christmas on it that plays music? I don't know.
I don't know, but
where a male MP has worn something that you maybe do consider a bit more flamboyant, and I wonder how that would be reported on. I'm curious. I don't know if there have been any incidents like that. I can't recall any. I can't recall any, which either means it's never happened, or it means nobody reported it with enough gusto for me to remember it.
Although I think it is worth saying that the press, anyway, obviously vilified Jeremy Corbyn for not being smart enough. So not wearing nice enough. So you've got Corbyn, who's obviously very left wing, not spending enough money on his clothes and is vilified. And then
Boris Johnson occasionally also got picked up for being scruffy, but not as much.
Yeah, I feel like he was jokey scruffy. We don't take rather than, why have you got that suit on? So it's just interesting that two left-leaning politicians, you haven't spent enough money on your appearance and you've spent too much money, even though we know that's not true. So it's kind of maybe it's not just women because he was obviously picked apart. But I feel it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I suppose a suit is a suit. Let's face it, isn't it? I mean, I know you can have a purple suit. a pink suit, but ultimately a suit is a suit. Whereas
A
when
suit
we
is
have
suit.
the guideline of smart, there's a lot of interpretation. You could go to Next and buy 60% of their product and wear that to work as smart, if you know what I mean. It's sort of safe
Yeah.
smart. But
It's
then you
not
could
just
also wear
get a suit and wear a shirt and tie.
yeah, and you could wear if you're a woman, you can wear a suit, but you could also wear, you could wear vintage, which I did. You can do lots of different things because it's the interpretation of that. So maybe it's just really rubbish being a man and you can only wear a suit.
Again, it's interesting because if you look at the professions and what people are expected to wear in those professions, so female-dominated professions like, fashion, maybe PR, that kind of thing, you will see a lot more variation in what people wear, whether they're men or women there. People will use their clothes as self-expression a lot more. And it's not necessarily even just that they're artistic careers, because PR isn't necessarily artistic, maybe, or, but anything, one of these kind of ones that's that's a bit more female orientated, then it's accepted a bit more. The kind of male orientated areas, once you start getting into, the C-suites and parliament and that kind of thing, it's long been, black, white. This is a serious job because it's male dominated, and therefore we don't have the mental space to be thinking about our clothes because we're far too serious and focused on the issues, not looking at pornography while we're in Parliament or whatever else it is that they've been picked up on doing. So it's kind of a representation of how serious they are. And then when women come into that space and they don't try and fit in with the how serious everyone is, that's then used as like a stick to beat them with. But I was also quite intrigued by it being left-leaning politicians that get more stick for this, because we all know that most of the major press things are right-wing and are, focused on trying to. It's very much that distraction technique that we've talked about before, isn't it? Like, if things are going around about what Hannah Spence was actually saying, and they don't want that. We want everybody focused on whether she's a hypocrite and whether her blouse cost £2,000 or 15 quid. We want to talk about that, not the actual issue that she was addressing in the speech. So there is that distraction technique. And then there's like the bots that we talked about that have started to try and turn social media in their direction as well, which, used to be a place where you felt like you could maybe get at the truth because you would see people. So there's a lot.
I think the bot bit, the online bit, is the bit that scares me the most, because whilst newspapers have always, most of the newspapers are right wing, as you said, we also know that nobody reads the newspapers anymore. And they might look at some headlines as they're in Tesco's, but generally people don't actually buy newspapers. But they do go on social media. And obviously it's been reported this week that, something we've already known, and I think we might have mentioned as well, about the Russians being involved with bots and creating content and being able to powerfully create content to incite riots and incite thought and incite in what's the word I'm looking for? Create just a furore.
Yeah. I couldn't think of the word then either.
But again, they're against the left side. So it's almost like this is the new media. So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, Theresa May in her leopard shoes would have absolutely everybody would. She was on. To be fair, I think she was probably on the front page of the Daily Mail, which is really right wing. But do you know what I mean? But they would have absolutely have done it, and people would have read it.
Yeah, but she's a woman, so
oh yeah, she's a woman. Good point. So that would have happened, and people would have read it because we read newspapers then. But now that we don't. The machine needs to kind of make us all believe something, and we know they're doing it by bots and things, and I just think that's so scary that an assumption becomes a fact within hours.
I think that's part of the danger. When it's in a newspaper, although it couldn't be true, you would hope that at least there's some kind of journalistic standards behind it. And it was like similar to what we said about the difference between teenagers on social media and reading Just 17. You would hope there are at least some journalistic standards behind it. Whereas on social media, anyone can put anything they want, and then it can be amplified by normal, human, regular people voices, and I'm sure that we do the same with like left-wing posts. I might read something that I agree with and that fits into my worldview.
Yeah.
And go, and I'll retweet that or share the post on Instagram, pop it on my stories. And again, I'm amplifying that voice. And I try and fact check, but I can't guarantee I do it for everything, because sometimes you do, don't you? You just see stuff and go, well, that's interesting. And off it goes into the ether, and you haven't checked whether it's nonsense or not. So it is kind of scary, because you hear these things from people that you trust. And you trust that person, but if that person themselves hasn't done their research, then you get this kind of snowball where, your charity shop shirt turns into a £2,000 Gucci.
It reminds me of that video that went really, really viral it was March time, where it was the dogs that had been kidnapped in China to be meat, and then they all escaped and they all walked home, and they followed the corgi all the way home, and it went viral so quickly, and we all believed it. And then it turned out it wasn't that at all. It was a dog on heat who was trying to actually get away from all of the dogs, and then we all had to go, oh, we're all so disappointed, because it was like the feel-good story we really wanted.
It was like we really needed this.
We really needed like Lassie or whatever, that film where all the dogs, I don't know, they don't get moved and they have to go home. I don't even know what it's called. And you follow their journey. It was like amazing. But we all believed it. And and obviously that doesn't matter, because that's not literally ripping a person to shreds or inciting a riot. But it's like, it's so easy to believe. And I think that's the bit back to Hannah, is like, it keeps happening and everybody's believing it. But then I also think, does it even matter if she was wearing Gucci anyway? I think there's also this, just, are you allowed to be left wing
and spend your
or
own
care
money
about the planet? I suppose it might be the caring about the planet bit, which is, and wear a shirt that costs £2,000. Is it ever okay?
Well, I don't think that wearing a shirt that costs £2,000 automatically excludes you from caring about the planet. If it was from Primark, I'd be more concerned in that. I would hope that a £2,000 Gucci shirt, I'm going to say I would hope it wasn't made in a sweatshop, but, we're promising nothing. But, so it doesn't exclude you from that.
No.
I guess it's that idea, when you're arguing that people should be paid fairly for their work, and that, you're trying to argue for the ordinary people, but then they're saying, look, she's not ordinary either. You can't afford to spend £2,000 on a shirt, and she can. Look how privileged she is. Look, she keeps picking on us for our privilege, and she's privileged too. And you kind of go, well, yeah, well, even if she is, and she spent £2,000 on a shirt, that doesn't negate her argument. You might have spent £2,000 on a shirt, and this is your privilege, and you're not arguing that other people should have enough money to live on.
Well, absolutely. People are allowed to buy a big house,
Yes.
and still care about homelessness. You are allowed to do that. Well, in fact, to be fair, again, getting too political, isn't that socialism? You are allowed to actually make money, but we also want everybody else to have some money too.
Yeah.
But
that doesn't mean you can't spend your money on nice things.
Exactly.
But you can. Nobody said she might have spent £2,000 on a shirt and donated £4,000 to a women's refuge, or or WWF or Greenpeace or something. You don't know what she did. If she is a millionaire, who cares? She might be doing she might be the Dolly Parton of the Green Party, for all we know. But but not the Elon Musk.
Yeah, and I think, to wrap it up, that is so true. So it doesn't matter if she was wearing it. In fact, she wasn't. It doesn't, it really does not matter. And actually, what we should be judging our politicians by what they say and what they do and how they behave, not by whether they're wearing a Donald Duck tie. I don't think they wear Donald Duck ties, or a Gucci, or a shirt that looked a bit like a Gucci shirt.
Okay, so this one might be a bit less obvious. You may not have seen it. It's from so I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole this week, and I want to talk about leftover women. There was a video doing the rounds. It's about China and the term that they use over there for women who hit their late 20s. I think 27 was the age they said in the video, and they still aren't married. The official word in China is, and I mean, my Chinese accent is amazing, sheng. It means leftover women, and not as in, oh, it's a bit spare. It means leftover food. So the Chinese character for sheng, the beginning part of that, is actually the same Chinese character that they mean for the stuff at the back of the fridge that nobody fancies. Like, the leftover food that you're like, I'm definitely going to eat that. And then you throw it away 2 weeks later, that kind of leftover food. So it's not some ancient insult that's been handed down through the centuries. It's modern, and it got pushed into the mainstream around 2007. And it was the government's own women's federation started running articles about these poor, picky, overeducated women. It's always overeducated, isn't it? who'd left it too late. Sound familiar? So they sat down and decided the most useful thing they could do is call it Smartest Young Women Scraps and try and persuade them that they were making really bad choices in life. So this is the interesting part. So this is where it's like, it's not all just how awful is it that they call women leftover. The word sheng for leftover sounds like exactly another word, also sheng, but it's a different Chinese character. And that Chinese character means victorious. So so it's the same sound, but a different character, I guess. We have things like that, don't we? Shirt and or th and z, which could be with a D or a T. So the women started taking that sheng yu and flipping it. But we're not leftover women, we are victorious women. And then a beauty brand, SK, is it 2? Roman numerals 2, SK2, made an advert about it that went around the world. It was women standing in the marriage market in Shanghai, refusing the label, which again, we're getting that sold back to us by a beauty. So when you kind of look at it, you realize that every country then has their own version of this. So I started looking into other terms that they use for leftover women. So this is I want to talk about language and how we talk about women. So in Japan, they call them Christmas cake, apparently, because it's women over the age of 25, because nobody wants the cake after the 25th. And then they've got a follow-up, New Year noodles, for women over 31. In Iran, the word is torshideh, which means pickled, soured, gone vinegary. In France, women still single at 25 was a Catherinette. And we don't get to feel too smug in the UK because we also have, of course, spinster, old maid, left on the shelf, and we've been describing women like leftover food for quite some time, whilst the single man gets to be a bachelor, which sounds a bit suave and sophisticated. Obviously, that might be 2007, but we're not over that yet, because in the US, JD Vance has obviously got a whole. Have you seen the Cats on a Couch account? So JD Vance criticised childless cat ladies, as he called them, and there is an Instagram account called Cats on a Couch, which exists solely to annoy JD Vance. So that's quite fun. And just this week in his new book, he decided that was one of the dumbest things he's ever said, I think, in order to rebrand himself. But the same government is offering $5,000 baby bonuses and floating medals for mothers who have 6 or more children, which is awesome. So the birth rate is the lowest in decades. Reform call it an existential crisis, obviously. And there are reports about the 600,000 women who will miss out on motherhood, of which I am obviously one of them. Poor me. Sympathy. So a few things I wanted to get into. One of them is, why is it food? Why are women leftover cakes and pickles and men are not? And then there's reclaiming business, taking insults back. Obviously, we saw that with like gay and queer and that kind of thing in the LGBTQ plus community. Reclaiming language is interesting. But I also did find it quite interesting because obviously China had was it a one child per family policy at one point? And the preference for sons in that instance, which we knew was bad at the time, led to a lot of female babies being abandoned and that kind of thing. But the preference for sons has meant that actually there's a massive imbalance in China at the moment. And so why are we calling the women the leftovers when actually there's more men than there are women? So even if all the women got married, there'd be some leftover men. So why aren't they the leftover men? Anyway, what words do you use or were used when you were, I'm going to say, growing up? Like, when you were younger, were there any specific words that you noted for single women?
It's funny because I don't think so, because not at the age of 25 and 27. It's definitely shifted, because I think when I grew up, a spinster was an old lady who was single, who hadn't had children, and back to the JD Vance, cat lady thing. Like it was like an old maid, left on the shelf. All those kinds of things. I think for me, it was always an older woman who had either made those life choices or had never been chosen. All that rubbish. I don't think I ever heard my own, because I didn't have children until I was 34, 35. I didn't meet Adam until I was 34, 35, because I got pregnant very quickly. So I don't recall anybody worrying that I was a leftover or a late mum. Obviously, there's things like geriatric mums. that's a medical term, even though I think it's women over 35 having a child, it's classed as a geriatric pregnancy, which obviously is the wrong word, but it's the word meaning that you're an older mother, an older woman in those reproductive years terms. Did you? Like, I don't remember being 27 and anyone saying, I mean, they might have gone, oh, you're going to, well, I'd already been married. I was married at 27. Maybe that's why I was never a leftover, because I was already married to a silly man that
Well, I got married about that point, but we'd been together for a very long time before that. So I wasn't in that position. I think possibly there was a little bit less of it in my, in my circles, actually saying stuff like that. But obviously we did get a lot of the, oh, don't leave it too late to have children, you'll regret it, and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, as I chose not to have children, I'll change my mind when I get older, obviously, which I'm not sure how much older I can get now without changing my mind. But, do I regret it? And all that kind of thing. Yeah, there's a lot of things I regret, and that's really not one of them.
But there wasn't what's the word I mean? A birth crisis. That's not the right word.
No, there's
was there. So they weren't worried.
So the birth rate crisis is obviously something that they point squarely at women. So fertility rate in the UK now is 1.39 in 2025, which is a record low. If you remember it, there used to be a TV show called 2.4 Children, because 2.4 children was like the standard. And that was when Reform and called it an existential crisis, and to scrap the 2-child cap on child benefit and marriage tax breaks. And I also have in here Miriam Cates, who's a leading natalism voice, and the CSJ's baby bust reports like 600,000 women who will miss out on motherhood in the UK. So that kind of is a thing that gets pushed. It's that kind of equating it to a birth rate crisis. I know that I wonder if that's like China's issue. They've got such a imbalance now because they had that restriction that they need to paint it as desirable, because the problem is then you've got these women and they're going to university, they're educated, they want a career, they've got options.
Yeah, and I think when I read the story, the thing that struck me, and I was chatting to my husband about last night, because he was saying it's the same in India too. It's this, they brought in the 1-child cap, and obviously India didn't have that, but they did prioritize male children, and finding out you were pregnant with a girl meant that you might terminate pregnancy, or as you said, give the child away. So they've created that as a thing. And they've also created as a thing that we want everybody, not just women, everybody to be as educated as possible, because we want to do really well in STEM, in technology, like in music, all these things. We want to excel. And the Chinese, just like other countries, really do want to excel in all of that. So they've pushed for a 1-child only, and the priority is to have a boy, but everybody to become as educated as possible, including the girls. So, of course, now we've got a situation where I think it worked out there's like a third more men. I think it was like 139 men for every 100 women. So they've, the crisis has been created by them, if you know what I mean, by the by the government or the system or whatever. And what I love is when you just said, why aren't they the leftovers? Because if there's 139 men to 100 women, 39 men aren't going to get married. I mean, let's face it, not all the 100 women are either. But let's just say they all get married. Then there's 39 men. What happens to them? And is that 39 men, that's going to keep happening? So they're the leftovers, not her, because they're the ones literally left over.
But what I'm always really interested in with this is that, so obviously it used to be that was what women did. We've talked about that before. The assumption was, you got married, you had children. That was the way your life was going to go. And this has changed. And women now have choices. But what interests me quite a lot is that all of these are targeted at women. And there is an assumption that it still benefits men. It's not the men that are choosing not to settle down with women. So it still benefits men to find a female partner if that is their preference, and settle down. Whereas the argument is then that suddenly we've got these educated women and it's not benefiting them to settle down. Because if it did, if that was their preference and then they wanted to do that, but it turns out we've got a lot of women who find men attractive but are rejecting the life where they're going to settle down, get married, and have children, and they're rejecting that. And that I find really interesting, because that is when it starts to become really obvious that that traditional setup benefited men more than women.
What's really interesting, and this is going to sound ridiculous, so bear with. Love Island currently this season, which I'm not watching. I'm trying not to get sucked in, but I get a running commentary
yet-
from my daughter. No, I get the running commentary from my daughter. Obviously, the whole premise is girl goes in, boy goes in, they meet, they get together, and hopefully win the prize. That's the whole premise. But the women this year, for the first time, are holding the guys to account and going, I'm not putting up with that behaviour. I'd rather wait, see who else. I know obviously they're still looking for a guy. It's still the same premise, but they're going, no, I'm not accepting that behaviour. I'm worth more than that. I have an opinion too. My opinion matters as much as your opinion. And my daughter's watching it. She's going, yeah, because it's like for the first time. So there's even a shift on freaking Love Island where the entire premise is to go find a guy. And I
think it feels like the death throes of the patriarchy. Do you know what I mean? Like they're like desperately trying to drag women back in. It's like they were like, oh, started with trying to make these things into insults, childless cat lady. And suddenly there's a load of women going, hang on, that sounds amazing.
I know. Well, didn't Taylor Swift, because obviously she is the nemesis of JD Vance, and then and he was calling her, she's going to be a childless cat lady because she hasn't had any children, and at that point she wasn't engaged. And so then she was on the front cover of Time magazine with a cat draped around her like a stole, a real cat, not a dead cat, like here I am posing with my cat because I am a cat woman. And it was just like going, I don't care, like leave me alone. I love though, and you've mentioned it already, the reclaiming the language. So it's like, leftover. Okay, so in China it means the sound also means victorious, which is amazing. But even if it didn't, it's like, whatever, let's have a leftover party, let's go on leftover holidays. It's like, and I love how, and I think it is predominantly young people, although I know older people are doing it too, but young people are really actively reclaiming language. As you've already said, queer, there's a lot of older people that I know still struggle with the term queer because it was used 100% as an insult. But younger people, and now actually more people, to be fair, I just have reclaimed the word. It's you can't hurt me, and and I'm queer and I'm proud. And I love that is happening. And I'm seeing my daughter's generation, they're reclaiming certain words like slag, for example. They, I think it still means what it meant. So it still is used as an insult, and that's not good. But they'll describe their top as a slaggy top or something, because it's almost like you can't.
I had my toenails painted in red the other day and I went, yes, that's an excellent slutty colour, love it.
Yes, exactly. So there's that kind of reclaiming it. So you can't hurt me with this language because we're already using it. And I think.
So do you think it works reclaiming it, or do you think it just keeps that alive as an insult?
Well, I think, obviously I'm not in the LGBTQ community, so I can only.
But if you think about words like slutty, for instance, then.
Well, I was going to say with queer though, I think as people get older, and sorry everybody, eventually the using it as the historical part of using it as a derogatory term will go as well. So I think that one has been really powerful, and I think that has worked. It's a difficult one because we were talking about the word slut or slag or something, and my son was like, no, that's definitely still used as a curse in a way that is factually correct. And I'm not saying factually as in she is, but in the right context.
In the context we would expect.
So it is still being used, but I think
by boys.
By boys, of course. Well, no, and girls, to be fair. I think girls do too.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I was just going to say so, but then women who would then say, I got slutty toenaillnails. Is that?
Yeah, I think there is
we
that.
Keeping
the
it alive?
reclaiming bit is lessening it somewhat. And even like, am I allowed to say the C word? Am I allowed to say that on the podcast? Even that, which is like a word we would never, well, we might use, but like we were brought up to never use. They use it all the time, and it's now used. Oh
yeah, that is used as a I've seen that too. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, in a way, it's like you can't hurt me with words, but then you can also hurt me with words. So it's like because words do matter. Because I wrote something when I made a reel about terminology that's really ageist. And there's one woman, and she always writes on my, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Don't let it hurt you. And it's like, well, if when it's supposed to hurt me, it's going to hurt me, because words do matter. But I think if you can kind of reclaim some of them, maybe it takes some power away from people. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because that's one of the things that is interesting here. And I guess if you're going to know that in something like this, leftover women, you're going to be called that, then you can reclaim that. And you go, well, yeah, fine, I'm leftover. It's absolutely fine. I'm
and also it's my choice. So I'm not left over because nobody chose me.
I think we're kind of reframing those stereotypes as well is something that I see. Like I was saying earlier, when everyone's like, well, you're going to be a childless cat lady. And like everyone was something like, oh no, am I going to be alone in my tidy flat with my cats and my books and nobody messing my things up? Like, suddenly you just go, oh no, that sounds awful. And I like that. I like that reclaiming of that as a concept. Like, very much, well, maybe that's what I want. Maybe childless cat lady is a choice.
Yeah, but I'm wondering,
not the result of a failure.
I'm wondering how much of that is us Gen X, though, because I wonder whether if I asked a 75, well, to be fair, like my mum's generation may have worried about that or seen it as a negative, whereas and I think it's very much a Gen X going whatever, whole kind of Rage Against the Machine thing. Bring it on. If I have
that's
a tidy
what I mean.
house and a cat.
We reclaimed that stereotype as a concept that I may be a childless cat lady, but I am fine with it. No, I am going to be a childless pug lady. I'm a married childless pug lady.
But I think people therefore scared of that, because as I said before, it's reclaiming the power, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a childless cat lady or a single cat lady or an old cat lady. I mean, I like cats. It's not a problem to me. Then it takes away that power, which is great for us. But I'm presuming that winds them people saying it up, because it would want, do you know what I mean? If I was using it as a curse for you, like being really nasty to you, and you were like, yeah, well,
oh yeah, I mean, anything that's designed to hurt people, but then you have a response to it where you can just say yes and diffuse that. You're a childless cat lady. Yes, as part of it's that refusal to be offended. Moving on from cat lady, we'll just finish up. I wanted to talk quickly about food words for women as well, because that's fascinating. I thought was so we had a leftover, obviously using the same symbol that's for leftover food. Miss cake. Pickled, left on the shelf. It's all a lot of it's to do with like expired food, and it's that concept that our value again is based solely on being able to produce children. It ties into a lot of stuff, even the nonomaxing, where we were saying the valuing of the wisdom of women who've been around a bit. So like women are, your value is entirely in your ability to reproduce, which is obviously a huge like kind of patriarchal system.
I took the food references as consumption rather than reproduction. Obviously, let's face it, I absolutely know that our value is intrinsically linked to many people to our reproductive years. But like, it's all consumption, it's ownership, and I've never thought of on the shelf. Being left on the shelf to me was always just being left. But you're right, on the shelf. It's like you're in the supermarket and you're that
tin of beans,
moldy whatever cabbage at the back.
No one wants that apple.
Yeah. So what is that all about? Well, I was thinking consumption or ownership, or I don't know, but I quite like being called a pickle.
Yeah.
I call my dog a little
pickle. I don't know.
pickle.
I mean, I still drink, so I can get pickled occasionally.
Well, who said pickle? What country was the pickle? You remember? Was it Japan?
I think that was
like
Iran. Hang on 1 second.
Oh, Iran.
In Iran, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, obviously. Torshadet, which means pickled, soured, gone vinegary,
Gone off,
basically. Yeah. So I think I think it's to do, with having an expiry date, with being you're no longer fresh because you're not. That's why my brain goes to reproduction. Is that after that age they're starting to go, oh, you're not.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because if somebody
you're in the geriatric pregnancy era.
Yes. If somebody called me soured, pickled, going off, it wouldn't make me want to even talk to them, let alone procreate with them. It's funny, isn't it? There's probably some more positive ways you could convince the girls to have babies, because calling her a mouldy bit of cabbage isn't really doing it for me, I have to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely know what you mean. Yeah, I don't really know how to wind this one up other than to say, well, yeah, I think I'll just say I think obviously it's great that women have the choice to tell men to fuck off now. Maybe that's not how I'll wind it up. We got something more inspiring.
Yes. Well, we have choices, and that's a good thing. But remember, men have choices too, and men can be leftovers and can be left on the shelf and not chosen.
Yeah, equal rights for pickles.
Thank you for joining us for another roundup of midlife chat, hot takes, and occasional moaning. Well, quite a bit of moaning.
Make sure you hit subscribe so your podcast app gently nudges you every Friday, because honestly, who remembers anything without a reminder these days? And also, we like people liking us because we're very needy.
And if you fancy being extra lovely, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more brilliant women like you find us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and make sure you find time for yourself. You deserve it.